You think about Elvis recording a song, you probably picture him in a studio. Maybe in Memphis at Sun Studio where it all started. Or in Nashville at RCA's Studio B. You see the band. You see the backup singers. You imagine the cost comes from paying all those people. You think about the studio rental, the engineers, the producers, and for a big production, that's a lot of money. No doubt. But what if the biggest cost wasn't any of that? What if the most expensive song Elvis ever recorded had nothing to do with how many hours they spent in the studio? What if the cost was hidden in the song itself, in its very DNA? This is the story of that song. A song that became an anthem for his 1970s shows. A massive, sweeping, emotional piece of music. It was a showstopper, but behind the scenes it was a financial headache, a deal so complex and expensive it set a record for his entire career. To understand why, you have to forget the usual costs for a minute. The musicians were expensive, sure. Elvis always worked with the best. He had his TCB band, James Burton on lead guitar, a legend, Jerry Sheff on bass, a rock, Ronnie Tutt on drums, a powerhouse, Glenn D. Hardin on piano. These guys were top session players. They commanded high fees. But that was standard for an Elvis project. Then you had the orchestra. This wasn't a simple rock and roll song, this was a spectacle. It required strings, horns, a whole symphony of sound to give it the power Elvis wanted. Hiring dozens of professional orchestra musicians costs a fortune. You pay them by the hour. You pay for the arranger who writes out all their sheet music. You pay for the conductor. This particular song had a huge orchestral arrangement. It was one of the biggest he'd ever used. The bill for the orchestra alone would have been staggering, enough to make it one of his most expensive recordings on that basis alone. And you had the singers, not just Elvis. He had his backup groups. The Sweet Inspirations, a female gospel and soul group. Shady, Sumner, and the Stamps Quartet, a male gospel group known for Sumner's incredibly low bass notes. Sometimes he'd use the Imperials. These are all successful recording artists in their own right. They weren't just local talent. Their involvement added another layer of cost. So you add it all up, the band, the orchestra, the singers, the studio time at RCA's Hollywood studio. The engineers, you're looking at a huge pile of money, probably more than for Hound Dog or Jailhouse Rock for sure. But even that wasn't the big one. That wasn't what made this one song stand out as the most expensive of all. The real cost was invisible. It was buried in paperwork, in copyright law. Most songs are simple. One person writes the music, another writes the lyrics, or maybe one person does both. When an artist like Elvis records that song, his record company, RCA, makes a deal with the songwriter's publisher. They agree on a royalty rate. For every record sold, or every time the song is played on the radio, the songwriter and their publisher get a small slice of the money. It's a standard business practice. But this song wasn't one song, it was three. It was a medley, a combination of different pieces of music woven together to make something new. And that's where the problem started. To record a medley, you don't need to deal with one songwriter. You need to deal with all of them. You need to get permission from each one. You need to negotiate a royalty with each one. Suddenly the paperwork triples. The legal complexity triples. The cost triples. Let's look at the three songs that made up this musical giant. The first part of the medley was an old song from the 1850s, a very, very famous song. A song deeply tied to the American South. It was written by a man from the North, ironically, for a minstrel show in New York City, but it was quickly adopted by the Confederacy. It became its unofficial national anthem. After the Civil War, it remained a powerful, and for many people, a painful symbol of the Old South. It was a piece of music loaded with history and controversy. By the 1970s, when Elvis recorded his version, this song was old. Very old. It was so old that its copyright had long expired. It was in what's called the public domain. That means anyone can use it for free. You don't need to ask permission. You don't need to pay anyone. It belongs to everyone. So, for the first part of this expensive medley, the cost was zero. That's simple enough. The second song in the medley was just as famous, but from the other side of the conflict. It was the anthem of the Union Army during the Civil War. Its melody was originally from an old campfire song, but the lyrics were written by a famous abolitionist in 1861. It's a song about justice and righteous fury, a powerful, marching, spiritual tune that became a symbol of the North's cause. Just like the first song, this one was also very old. By the 1970s, it too was in the public domain. No copyright, no publisher to pay. Anyone could record it, change it, or use it however they wanted without paying a dime. So for the second part of this expensive medley, the cost was also zero. So far, we have a very expensive recording session for a song that is, legally speaking, completely free. 2/3 of the medley cost nothing in publishing rights. This doesn't make any sense. Where did the cost come from? It came from the third song, and from the man who put them all together. The third piece of music was different. It wasn't a battle anthem, it was a spiritual. A gentle, folk lullaby. Its origins are a little hazy, traced back to the Bahamas. It's a song of quiet suffering and hope, a mother singing to her child, promising that even though there are trials in this life, they will soon be over. It found its way into the American folk music revival of the 1950s and 60s. Many folk singers performed it. It was considered a traditional song, and like many traditional folk songs, its original author was unknown. It had been passed down through generations. This usually means it's in the public domain just like the other two. It's free to use. So we have 3 songs, all seemingly in the public domain. Why was this the most expensive song Elvis ever recorded? The answer lies with a man named Mickey Newbury. Newbury was a brilliant songwriter. He wasn't a pop star, but he was highly respected in Nashville and beyond. He wrote songs that were deep, moody, and complex. He was part of a movement of songwriters who were pushing country music into more artistic, more serious territory. In the late 1960s, Newbury was playing a gig at a club in Los Angeles. He was experimenting with his sound. He decided to try something new. He felt the country was being torn apart. The Vietnam War was raging. Protests were everywhere. There was a deep cultural and political divide. Newbury had an idea. What if he could take these symbols of division, the anthem of the South and the anthem of the North, and unite them? What if he could show that they were all part of the same American story? So he took the Southern anthem, then he took the Union Battle Hymn, and he used the gentle, hopeful spiritual as a bridge to connect them. He didn't just play them one after another, he arranged them, he wove them together. He wrote new transitions, he changed the tempo, he created a musical journey that started with one, moved to the next, and ended with a grand unified finale. He created a new piece of art out of 3 old ones. And here's the crucial part. While the original songs were in the public domain, his arrangement of them was not. Copyright law is tricky. You can't copyright an old idea, but you can copyright your unique expression of that idea. Newbury didn't write the 3 original songs, but he created the medley. He created the specific way they fit together. That arrangement, that unique combination was his intellectual property. He owned it. He got a copyright for his version, so when Elvis heard Mickey Newbury perform this medley, he was blown away. This was in the early 1970s. Elvis was looking for big, powerful songs for his Las Vegas shows. He wanted drama. He wanted emotion. This song had it all. It was patriotic, it was spiritual, it was deeply moving. It was perfect for the grand spectacle his concerts had become. He told his people, I have to record that song. And that's when the trouble started for his manager, Colonel Tom Parker, and his record label, RCA. They couldn't just use it, they couldn't just take the idea, they had to go to Mickey Newbury. They had to make a deal, and Newbury and his publisher held all the cards. Normally, the Colonel was a master negotiator. He was famous for his tough, often ruthless business practices. When Elvis recorded a song, the Colonel would often pressure the original songwriters to give up a piece of their publishing rights to Elvis's own publishing company. It was a way to make sure Elvis got a piece of the writing money, not just the performance money. Many young, unknown songwriters agreed because they were desperate to have Elvis record their song. They could make their career, but Mickey Newbury was not a young, unknown songwriter. He was an established, respected artist in his own right. He didn't need Elvis. And he had created something truly unique. He wasn't going to be pushed around. The negotiation was intense. The Colonel and RCA wanted the song badly. Elvis was insistent. But Newbury and his publisher knew what they had. They had the key that unlocked the whole thing. Without their permission, there was no song. Elvis could sing the Southern Anthem for free. He could sing the Union Hymn for free. He could sing the spiritual for free. But he could not sing them together in that specific, powerful way that Newbury had invented. So Newbury's side laid out their terms, and their terms were unprecedented. They didn't just want a standard royalty, they demanded a significant percentage of the publishing rights for the entire medley. Think about that. 2/3 of the song was public domain material, technically free, but because Newbury had created the arrangement, he was able to claim a stake in the whole thing. RCA and the Colonel had to agree to give Newbury's publishing company a huge piece of the pie. It wasn't just a one-time fee. A big one-time fee would have been expensive, but manageable. This was different. This was a deal that would cost them money forever. Every single time a record containing that song was sold, a chunk of the money went to Mickey Newbury. Every time it was played on the radio, money went to Mickey Newbury. Every time it was performed on television, money went to Mickey Newbury. This deal was so heavily skewed in Newbury's favor that it became legendary in the music business. The Colonel, who prided himself on getting the best deals for Elvis and for himself, had to give in. He had no choice. Elvis wanted the song, and this was the only way to get it. So the final cost of the song wasn't the thousands of dollars for the orchestra or the band. The final cost was a perpetual river of royalties flowing away from Elvis's camp and toward Mickey Newbury's. Over the years, that river of money would grow into a flood. Elvis recorded the song in 1972. It immediately became a centerpiece of his live shows. He performed it with immense passion. The performance would start quietly with just his voice and a simple accompaniment. It would build slowly. A flute solo would often bridge the sections. Then the orchestra would swell, the backup singers would come in with full gospel power, and it would end in a massive, earth-shaking crescendo with drums crashing and Elvis holding a final powerful note. It was pure theater. The song's power was put on full display in his 1973 television special, Aloha, from Hawaii via satellite. This was a massive event. It was the first concert broadcast globally via satellite. It was seen by over 1 billion people in more than 40 countries, and one of the biggest moments in that concert was his performance of this medley. He stood on stage in his white eagle emblazoned jumpsuit, a symbol of America, singing this song about American unity. That single performance magnified the cost of the song exponentially. The concert album was a huge bestseller all over the world. Millions of copies were sold. And for every single album sold, Mickey Newbury and his publisher got their cut. A cut of a song that was mostly public domain material. It was a brilliant move on their part, and an incredibly expensive one for RCA. The song's legacy is complex. For Elvis, it was a sincere statement. He was a Southerner who had grown up with the music of both black and white traditions. He saw the medley as a song of healing, a way to bring the fractured pieces of the country's history together. By singing the anthem of the South and the anthem of the North in the same breath, linked by a spiritual of hope, he was making a powerful statement. He was using his platform to say, "We are all one." For many fans, it remains one of his most powerful and moving performances. It captures the scale and ambition of his 70s era. It was bigger than rock and roll. It was grand, operatic, and unabashedly emotional. But behind the emotion, there was always the deal. The deal that made it the most expensive song he ever touched. It wasn't about a single invoice for studio time. It was about a clever songwriter who understood the power of copyright. He took 3 pieces of history, added his own spark of genius to connect them, and in doing so created a piece of intellectual property so valuable that even the king of rock and roll had to pay a king's ransom for it. Every time you hear that song, remember the hidden story. It's not just a story about music. It's a story about history, division, and unity. And it's a story about a business deal so lopsided, so costly, that it went down in music history. A deal born from one man's brilliant idea to weave 3 songs into one. That song, the most expensive and complex deal of his career, was An American Trilogy.